Welcome everybody. Thank you for coming back to Hope Interaction. Let me just admit Jonathan from Canterbury Diocese, don't want to upset them. Thank you so much for coming to this one, which is the third in our little series of housing the homeless. I went to a Zoominar today, and it was a group of people who are ex-homeless people. They were all quite young, and they were talking about the people and things that have really helped them the most. And it was having someone to listen to them, really good listeners, having people that really believed that they can get through this, that really believed that they could do it, and were there in thick and thin, getting alongside them, befriending them, helping them with whatever it was that they needed help with, whether it was finding a local doctor, whether it was understanding how to use stuff in the house, whether it was cooking skills, whether it was writing a CV, whatever it was, they were there for them. And I thought, do you know what? This so goes the opposite to what you normally hear when homeless people are offered temporary accommodation. They usually hear something like, it's a great home, it's got a microwave. Do you know what I mean? This is radically different. This is about making a home. And I just want to say to you that we want to be radically different. We want to be part of this movement to not just look at intervention and recovery as being our sole objective, but we want to look at prevention. And we really firmly believe that the Hope Interaction model is the one for us. We already run night shelters, and we know we can do that. We have lots of volunteers. The phone's been ringing off the hook. The emails have been pouring in. Local authorities want to get on board with us. Other dioceses, clergy of all Anglicans, Methodists, Baptists, you name it, Salvation Army. We've had therapists. We've had people, professional people, nurses. Some of you are here today. We've got all of Transform Bromley Borough today, Transform Bexley Borough. So I just want to say to you, the power is in our hands to make this happen. And tonight really is the crunch time, because what we did last week, we started to form the discussion groups. And I just want you to feel so uplifted and so positive that we now have six areas of people who are not just passionate, but very capable. This could happen. And those 6 areas are, we have groups in them already, which you can feed into: Bromley, Bexley, Medway, North Kent with Gravesham, East Kent and West Kent. 6 areas. This is amazing. We have had some investors come forwards. We haven't got the bricks and mortar at this moment in time. From today onwards, the work starts to get this to happen. We're very blessed tonight that John is with us again. He's the government's advisor on rough sleeping. And of course, tonight is about franchises. Last week, we talked about holistic care, how to care for a person, mind, body and spirit, whole person care with Nick from Living Well. And on Wednesday night this week, we're doing that in our community hubs. But tonight it's about the franchises, it's about the empowerment workers, it's about what this is actually going to look like on the ground. At some point tonight, we're going to have a pop-in from Dan, who works with Archbishop Justin, the Archbishop of Canterbury. He is fully supportive of what we're doing, and Dan is just going to pop in and say a few words about how it works in for him. So I'll pop him on when I see him arrive. But meanwhile, I'm going to hand over now to Ed Walker. He's the CEO of Hope Interaction. He's already housing, as we speak, right at this minute, 170 people with churches, with the community, living in the community with Hope Interaction in 66 churches. And this afternoon, Ed, you were telling me that you're about to open another house in Bury St Edmunds. So wow to that. Thank you very much. Over to you, Ed.
Yeah, thank you very much. And yeah, once again, it's a pleasure to be here. It's a pleasure to hear everyone. And just want to check, was John going to say something before and then after, Caroline?
I don't know. What do you want to do, John?
I don't mind, Ed. I can say something brief if you want, and then you can pick it up.
Ed. This is John, who didn't say it was his birthday last time. So happy birthday, John, from all of us.
Much appreciated, thanks. And it's fantastic to see so many people, and I think it's brilliant. You know, you've come to that initial meeting, thought about it, and come back. And I just really want to affirm that. As Caroline said, I'm advising the government. I've been working for homeless charities for about 25 years in different roles, and I just want to say, recap over a few of the things that I talked about last time. But just to remind you a bit on the why, and then Ed's going to really talk about some crunchy stuff about the how and how his scheme works. I'm just going to share a couple of slides. Can people see those? Caroline, are they coming up?
Yep, they're good. They're good to go.
That's great. So we talked last time about the particular challenge of COVID. You might remember this slide that I put up about the sort of the danger and the opportunity. And of course, it's been a terribly difficult time for our communities, but I have to just re-emphasize that some of the coming together that there's been between local authorities, between charities, between churches and other faith groups has been really inspiring. And I think in homelessness, it's one area where we're really struck by the opportunity that exists at this current time. And I just want to emphasize the important role of the church. You know, it's a really key thing in my job, you know, looking at how the church can respond and make the most of these opportunities. And one of the models that I quite like using is this thing that when we think about what leads to someone's rough sleeping, this really connects to what Caroline was saying. Obviously, in a very obvious way, that there's a poverty of resources that people have, you know, not having an affordable home, you know, being affected by unemployment or the recession or the loss of job. Obviously, COVID has really increased the squeeze on lots of people. We're not really sure what impact that's going to have in terms of homelessness as yet. But that's obviously a very key aspect of homelessness, but it's not the only one. And what you could call a poverty of relationships that is so relevant for a lot of the people that Ed is working with and helping to house. Ed writes quite a lot about relationships and the importance of them. And of course, these two things are linked completely. Often it's the people who've got a real squeeze on their resources that have the most pressure in their relationships. And equally, relationship breakdown and difficulties in families obviously can increase people's you know, material poverty. But in addition, I think lastly, this sort of poverty of identity, where, you know, you could really describe a lot of the mental health problems that people have, a lot of the substance misuse challenges, often really linked to not just a poverty which relates to how they relate to other people, but how they relate to themselves. And there's a lot of people whose resilience and sense of self-worth is very low and very vulnerable and fragile. And I think, you know, for me, these three headings give a kind of interlocking reason, both for the problem, but also some of the solutions. Because homelessness, and I'm sure a lot of people on this call have a lot of experience of these issues, homelessness is a lot more than just houselessness. You know, and houses are resources, and they're vital resources. And Ed's going to talk about, you know, the sometimes complex business of securing those resources. They're absolutely critical. But bricks and mortar alone aren't the sole answer to this issue. You know, relationships are so vital to help people feel a sense of being with others. You know, we find our humanity in our relationships with others. You know, often it's the relationships that have been under real strain and stress for a whole range of reasons. And also a message which obviously is so central in the church, that has a message that can speak to people's very identity. I mean, that's really the essence of being born again, is all about a change of identity, isn't it? And these things are very central in the Christian faith. So I think, you know, homes are essentially, you know, places of relationships and identity. I think that's what we appreciate about feeling at home. And I use this model as well because I think that churches have the ability to address all three of these forms of poverty. You know, we're going to talk tonight about how we can secure resources, but then they can be filled out with relationships and warmth and love, and all these things that we value dear. And also that people can really discover a new identity for themselves, not as a sort of passive victim just being dished out charity, but actually resources that help them establish who they are for themselves, their own potential, you know, what they can do. So that's just a little bit of a reminder, I think, about some of the challenges that a lot of the people we're talking about face, and to encourage you that I really, really believe that churches have this unique role to play, especially in the UK, to address these forms of poverty, and actually, you know, as in Ed's organisational title, to bring hope by meeting each of these different challenges. So I think I'll end there, Caroline, and over to Ed. I'll stop there.
Thank you so much. And what I'm going to do, I'm just going to pop Dan on. I did explain about Dan to start with, because Dan has arrived, and Dan is the Archbishop's advisor on building communities. Dan.
Oh, that's a lot grander than I usually am. So I'm a researcher for the Archbishop of Canterbury's Housing Commission. So yeah, I help them out. Thanks so much for coming, having me today. But I'm here to tell you about that commission, and basically remind you that not only do you have John and MHCLG behind you, but you've also got people up and down the country in churches. So you're kind of part of this movement who are looking at this preventative approach to homelessness. Because yeah, as John said, churches have such an important role to play. But you're also kind of trailblazers, I think, and the Archbishop's Housing Commission is really interested to see how it goes, and see how we can enable other people by looking at what you're doing. So just to kind of explain what the commission is, if you haven't heard about it, it comes out of Archbishop Justin's book, Reimagining Britain, which was a couple of years ago. He was kind of looking at the crossroads that the country was at that point, and we kind of still are at a crossroads, and saying, if we think carefully, we could set up a fair, kind of healthy future for the country. But if we don't take that initiative, then there's potential for it not to go so well. And he looked at various areas of crises, so education, social care, and then he built a vision for those based on Christian values, how we could reimagine them. The idea, really, the one that captured attention was the housing one, because it went beyond the numbers game, and it looked at community and also supporting people holistically, which is what we're here to talk about tonight. And the idea of the commission is basically to flesh out that work from the book, and provide a distinctly Christian perspective to the debate. So it brings together people from across the church and the housing sector, to give some answers to that. The idea, though, really isn't to shout at the government, but to put our money where our mouth is as churches, because there's so much to do to help. And that provides leverage when we're talking to the government, but it also makes sure that regardless of what else happens, we have a great effect on society. So the commission is divided into 4 streams, and I'll just quickly run through what the commission is doing. So we've got a theology stream, because basically we found, talking to a lot of churches, that they knew this was what they should be doing. They knew that Jesus was calling them to do this, but there wasn't enough theology behind it to justify it when they were talking to others. So it's quite a new area of theology to talk about housing, to talk about land, but we're putting together some really good work on that. And then there's the policy stream, so that's the kind of talking to the government stuff, bringing together housing academics and professionals, and yeah, using that convening power that Lambeth Palace has, Justin standing in his hat, to make sure that we really have an effect on society. And then we've got a stream focusing on the national church institutions and the diocese. So that's how they manage their property support, but also how the church commissioners manage their land and money. Basically, essentially, we want every part of the church to be in alignment on this, so that it's not just you guys in local parishes or in dioceses doing stuff, but every part of the church, yeah, working towards this vision, and not undermining it as we're going. And then finally, there is that kind of local church and community stream. So the stuff that you lot are doing, which is looking at how we enable more of it. There are so many parts of this, but I'll run through a couple of them. The first thing that we found was that a lot of churches were doing stuff to address housing needs, but not necessarily talking about it as widely as it could be talked about. And that meant that other people didn't get the inspiration that they could get from it. So we've been doing weekly blogs to highlight the good work that people have been done, and that includes highlighting things like Hope into Action's work, highlighting their call to arms. We've also run commissions, competitions for local churches to look at how they can use their buildings to respond to housing. And we're producing loads of resources to equip local churches to take those preventative responses that we're kind of encouraging people to do. So that's where your work comes in. It's really exciting seeing this new work starting, which goes along the lines that Archbishop Justin was encouraging. So not just responding to homelessness, but also preventing it by helping people get out of the cycles of homelessness. I think sometimes in the church, maybe we're not brave enough. We believe we have to just be reactive, but being preventative right now is absolutely crucial. We're at a real crucial time to do this because, as has been said, the current crisis is really making us re-examine how everyone responds to homelessness. Night shelters are tricky right now, and they may be for quite some time. But we also can't go back to that mass rough sleeping, and churches like yours are going to be the ones who are crucial to that. So yeah, Hope into Action is a great model. It mirrors what the Commission is trying to do, in that not only is it kind of looking at things holistically, but it's also trying to equip individual churches, not just tell them, oh, you need to do more, actually help them through that process, providing that blueprint, but also providing the supports, so that we're not reinventing the wheel every time a church wants to be more preventative. So yeah, your work comes at a crucial time for the country, for the church, and especially through the work of the Commission. And as we're, as a Commission, moving from learning from what's gone before to enabling others to do more, you're one of these kind of first schemes in the transition. So we really want to keep in touch with you to see what successes you have, and also what barriers you come up against. Because hopefully some of the outputs that you come out with will be great to feature, to show that the church is doing some really great stuff on this. Yeah, ultimately, if us as churches and the government and the housing sector work together, which is the aim of us as a commission, then we can give people real stability. So thank you so much for the work you're doing.
Thank you, Dan. It was great that you popped in. We know that it was a flying visit. Thank you very, very much indeed. Thank you. God bless.
Thanks. Sorry for going so fast. Cheers.
Bye.
Bye.
Okay, here we go. Come on then, Ed. How are we going to get this done? Let's hear it.
Okay, great. So this is the, I guess most of you have been on the previous seminars. I'm guessing you're here because you're wanting to, yeah, you've got a sense that, yeah, I want my church or my group that I'm involved in to house the homeless, and you want some nitty gritty, and you've got some questions that need answering. So we're going to go from the inspiration of John and Dan to the fairly boring of Ed, and we'll try and get into some nitty gritty for you. I'm just going to work out if I can share my screen. And there we go. You should be able to see something now. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Great. Okay, so that's where we are. That's where we are around the country. Over 200 tenants, and a mixture of line managed, full franchise, and franchise lights, which we're going to come on to. Just to remind you of the model, that is our tenant or homeless guy using investment capital. We're going to come back to this. We buy a house. There's some questions I know have come up. Every single one of those rooms, if you put 3 or maybe even 4 people in there, we tend to put 2 or 3, but in London it may have to be 4 if you can squeeze one of them in. But let's say you've got 3, each of those you'll charge a rent on, so therefore you will make rent on each of those, and the tenants cover the utilities, but the franchisee will cover the gas and safety and maintenance costs. We can go over that. Church is in partnership with the house, and a house in partnership with the church. Church provide that relational strength we've discussed, and then alongside that is the quality seam of an empowerment worker. This is a bit more complicated. Just to say, our first 4 line managed cities, we have 43 town houses in. That's where we gestate and develop best practice. So anything on quality, anything on policies, anything on, we're developing it the whole time. We're always working on it, and then we roll that out to our franchise friends, and we've got new franchise friends coming. So this is the boring bit. This is the nitty gritty, which in our line managed cities, we ourselves, they're under the charity called Hope into Action UK that I run. We provide the EW to churches. The church provides the Friendship and Support Group. We collect the rent, and we grow from one. We continue to grow it. So in Peterborough now there are 18 churches and 18 houses, and we've got more in the pipeline in all 4 of those cities. In the full franchise. So this is where a charity or an organization would have its own independent board. They'd sign a franchise agreement with us. The franchise, so this might be, say, Bexley or Bromley, they themselves would provide the empowerment worker. They themselves would have a relationship with the church. We provide the agreement, but if say, Living Well Trust became a franchise, they would have an agreement with a local church who provides the Friendship and Support Group. The franchise collects the rent, not us. And so we teach you how to collect the rent. We teach you how to make money on every single house. And you can grow it as much as you want in Bromley or Bexley or wherever it is you're from. Any church within Bromley, in legal terms, you have the right to replicate our model with. So no one else can have that. So if there are, let's say, 60 churches in Bromley, every single one of those you have the right to replicate into. If you think, hang on, 60 in Bromley, or I'm just a small area and you just want to do one house in your area, or you just say, well, I want to start with one house and then we'll see what it's like and maybe grow, or you want to have a number of volunteers drawn from a number of churches, then you'd be what's called a franchise light. And the church provides the empowerment worker. And roughly speaking, we say an empowerment worker needs to work for 1 day per week per house. What it can't be is a Tuesday, though. It has to be spread over Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, for example, because the issues in the houses are always ongoing. So if you just felt, we could do one house with my church to start off with, that's fine. You need to provide an empowerment worker. Often they are volunteers. We will train up the empowerment workers. We'll train up with and all of these. We come and train the churches in how to be good friends, how to befriend, how to do that love. And then we would prefer it if you collect the rent. But if you feel unsure about that, we in Peterborough can collect the rent, and we can pay back the investor, pay the council tax, etc. Okay, and generally if you're a franchise light, you're just thinking of 1 or 2 houses. If you've got 3 houses after that, you're then probably going to transition into a full franchise. If you want to be any of those things, you get our training. We will train you up how to do that. We train in everything from how you do house maintenance to how you do the tenant support to how you do the whole shooting match. We would particularly plug into the empowerment workers. They're our main conduit. We try and download our brains into their brains, and we do that through a variety of means. We have an online manual. We have training days on everything from safeguarding to tenant support to what it means to minister into someone who's got shame or trauma or whatever it is. So there's loads of kind of a program that they can just plug into and feel topped up, connected, inspired, extra knowledge that we provide on an ongoing basis. Just the other thing to say, you get this is a picture of our online manual, so you'll get this, you'll get your own site that you'll work on, and that if you're setting this up, you don't want to worry about GDPR and you don't want to worry about the security of your files. But if you are taking information off a tenant or a homeless guy, actually you have a responsibility to make sure you manage that information. Good news, we've worked all that out. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. If you plonk it on here, it's secure, and we've got the GDPR covered, as just an example. So this is some of the stuff you get. Lots of things, referral forms. You buy all that off us. We assessment forms, how to move someone in, all the checklists for that. We've got all that packaged for you. We'll train you on how to use it. We've got an advisor there to support you through every single step. And whatever you need to know, we've got online for you. Then once or twice a year we come down and we check what you come and visit you, we check it's okay, we encourage you, we support you, and we ensure quality. And then once a year we do a desk audit to check you've got your gas certificates, check all that stuff that you don't want to think about now, especially if you're not a church leader. We've got covered, we can support you in, which means you don't have to reinvent all these really important but frankly fairly dull wheels, but they are highly necessary. That is me. I'm going to stop there and hand back to Karen. I've done that dead quick, but I just wanted to kind of, where in a sense you're here, you've probably got burning questions you want to ask, so I'll be quiet there.
Okay.
The final thing I would say is from what I'm gathering, you've got a lot of churches, a lot of church volunteers, some of you, and your big question is the house. How do I get a house? Houses in Peterborough, 150,000. I understand that's not how much they cost in Bromley. We are going to come to that. John's going to speak, and then we'll try and come up with some solutions to help you think through that.
That was the fastest ever going through that franchise, and that was good. But I don't know whether, John, you want to talk or whether we just go straight to questions. Are you thinking you might say something now, John, or do you want us to go questions?
20 seconds, really. I think it's just a little bit to chuck in a bit more why in amongst the how. I think that there's obviously some very difficult discussions going on at the moment about things like night shelters, which have been a fantastic way that Christians have expressed their faith to support the most vulnerable. And I think that the really interesting thing about Ed's model and others like it is this development on from that kind of commitment, especially at a time when the future is quite uncertain. I think it's really interesting to explore this longer term housing element, which could be a kind of step on from some of the other ways that we've been involved. So that's as far as I was.
Okay, thank you, John. Now, I felt quite good about that because I sort of feel like I knew the answers to those questions. And what I'd like is Nigel, who's in our team. Nigel is going to pose to Ed and John any questions that you've been asking and really grill them now so that we can get to the bottom of that. And any questions for me as well, if you've got any. Over to you, Nigel.
Okay, Ed, you obviously picked up on some of the questions which came in writing during the day, and I will pick up on one or two of those as we kind of go through. So these are a bit random as they've come in on the chat line, and I hope folks will forgive me if I've missed anything. I'll keep an eye on it as I go. Do you charge, or is a market rent charged on the properties?
Yeah, so we try to keep our rents affordable. That's a really important principle to us. Otherwise, what you do if you make them really high, you can sustain worklessness. So we have a formula by which we work it out. It's just around about market value. There is something else we do which will train you in how you can collect rent through exempt accommodation status. What that means is you can claim more than the LHA rates. We'll take you through all that. We've won it everywhere we've worked, so you'll win it again where you are. But yes, we will charge rent, we'll keep them affordable, and in the event our tenants get work, we drop the rent.
Thank you. John, one for you. What happens to those who don't get into Hope into Action Home? Will the shelter still be an option in this coming winter?
We're in discussions a lot with Housing Justice and other groups about what options there will be. I mean, obviously, Hope into Action is one agency among many. I think it's particularly relevant for churches and their response. But we are doing a lot of the central government is working with all the local authorities to try and make sure there are proper plans in place for all of the kind of 15,000 plus people who've been in hotels. So I think this is one piece of the jigsaw. At the moment, the advice from the government is that shelters aren't safe to open at the moment because of the situation. We've got to do all we can, I think, to try and ensure they're not needed as much as possible. There are areas where there are rough sleepers, like in central London at the moment, and the councils and charities are working really, really hard on those options. But I think we're talking about, a particular model that's appropriate for some people would really make a great contribution to the overall problem.
Can I just also interject on that? I'm also the chair of Medway Night Shelter, and a number of you are here tonight who are night shelter leaders, and we're very blessed that Vanessa Nichols, who is actually the Housing Justice area coordinator for quite a large patch of our diocese, is also here and will be leading that West Kent group for this, which is great. We are working with Housing Justice at looking at other options, but the main problem, as you will all be very, very aware, is we operate with dormitory style accommodation. That's what we have in churches, and there's nothing we can do to change that. Screens are not going to be good enough. It would have to be complete pods. It has to be separate. So we are working on it, but that's why, again, we feel that getting people into homes is the better option for us.
Okay, I'll try and keep going with these. How long roughly do people stay in a Hope into Action house? What's the options for them when they move on? I suppose that kind of links to what's the relationship with the local authorities.
Yeah, sure. Very good question. Our average length of stay in our Hope into Action houses is just over 11 months. Now, if you want to do good work with someone, it takes more than 6 days. So it's important we journey with them for the long haul. Some bounce through dead quick, and that's cool. They need someone to stabilize, and then they move on. We try and have 2 years as a maximum. There are occasions where I think it'd be inappropriate to move people on at that time. They're still in a vulnerable stage of their recovery, and then when we do move them on, we try and move them on into social housing or private rented, and build up relationships with local landlords. So while on the one hand we tell people this is your home, on the other hand, from day one we're letting them know you need to move out of this at some stage. We need to help you, but we're preparing you to move out of that. I hope that answer the question.
I hope so. This is kind of sort of interlinked. Hang on 2 seconds. Yeah, okay. If the church has a house which is basically currently renting out, can a rental property work just as well as a house that's owned? I suppose is probably the way the question's being phrased, and there's another one's kind of linked to that as well.
Yeah, I think it's a really important question. The near you are to London, the one house we've got going in London is we haven't yet opened, but it is a curate's house that they've been renting out on the commercial market. So they're now using that existing asset for a Hope into Action house. And I'd really encourage people to think about what existing assets they've got or they can get and use for this. So yes, you can. Let's say if you've got a curate's house, just for an example, you could give the tenants notice, move them on with sufficient time. In the meantime, we can train you up, and then you can move the tenants in. You can still collect rent on that, so you should still have the same sort of financial income off it. But in the meantime, that asset is being used to house the homeless. And someone said, will it still be nice? Yes, absolutely. Our houses can still be nice. And we expect very high standards from our tenants. And some of them are OCD tidy and will make your house very nice. Of course, also, some aren't. And so that's a risk I'm sure you'd be aware of. But don't assume because someone's homeless that therefore they're untidy. They're the range of personality types.
And also, I mean, you're going to have people who are rough sleepers. You're going to have people who have fled domestic abuse, people who are victims of slavery. You're going to have people coming in at different levels.
Who identifies the tenants or the guests in the first place, in the first time they go into a property?
Yeah, so if you're a franchise, then what you've bought off us is we've got a nice agency leaflet that you can take to your agencies and show people in referring agencies, look, we are sound, we know what we're talking about. Then you have a referral form. You don't have to reinvent that wheel. We've got that. And then we'll train you, the empowerment worker and the church, through an assessment process whereby you can judge, hopefully wisely, but with the Holy Spirit as well, if this gentleman or lady or woman is suitable for your house and the appropriate level of need, really wants to change. That's really important. And the appropriate level of risk and has got strengths that you feel you can work on. So in short, you would do it, but we would be behind you. And I think we build something into the franchise agreement that we have the right of reply or the right to say no. In reality, we rarely do. We just ask lots of difficult questions. But the first tenant you move in is actually often, it's a really important one. Get that right, it's really important.
And also, don't forget that we do have, because we run the night shelters, we do have we have contacts with all of the local agencies and authorities and everyone that's there. We would use all of those contacts.
And I assume those assessments would take into account things like the proximity of the house to, say, a primary school or a nursery and things like that. It's about safeguarding, I think, is where there's two parts to that kind of question.
Yeah, if you've got a child that you're assessing, if you're assessing a female with children or a family, then of course you take all that into consideration, if that's the question.
And presumably part of your policies and procedures include all the safeguarding stuff, because it's kind of interlinked as well.
Yeah, absolutely. We train you up on safeguarding. We do mandatory safeguard training that people have to go through every year. And all the forms are there. We ask you to report on safeguarding every single year to us, upload them onto our site, so we can store them forever, basically.
Okay. You said a little while ago that when a tenant potentially gets a job, the rent drops. Can you just expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, that's the headline thing. Technically, you can't drop someone's rents. If you've got two unrelated people in a house, you can't drop one person's rent and raise the others. So what we do is we give them a bursary in accounting terms. And so if the rent's £100, they get a job, you say, okay, pay us 80, we're going to give you a bursary for 20. And so it still comes out as 100. But effectively, we're trying to incentivize work and trying to encourage people into independent living. And what we say is our social objectives must be more important than our financial objectives. So if we want them into work, we have to take the risk and trust God for that 20 quid a week.
Okay, this is a slightly kind of sort of double twist question, if you like. Does Hope Interaction charge a commission or charge for its services, and what's included?
Sure. So what's included is kind of everything I've tried to outline in Whistle Stop Tour. We train you, you get our manual, you get online sites, you get an advisor, you get visits, you get our annual training. And our brand, of course, that's the other thing you can, use of our brand. What's the fee? The full franchise, £1,500 up front, £1,500 up front, and then £30 a month, but that rises as you open a house. And if you open two houses, we get a bit slightly more. If it's a franchise light, it's £1,150 up front, and then £30 to £50 a month, depending on your means. We keep those. I don't know what you think about those costs, but for us, we're clear they're nowhere near our cost recovery, which is fine, and we're delighted to do that because we don't want to discriminate against any church, but we want to charge enough so that whoever's paying the fee values the relationship and values our intellectual property and so on. So that's our thinking behind the pricing structure. It's not a full cost recovery pricing structure, and I hope it makes it affordable for all of your organizations or churches.
Okay, if you're a lead franchise, a church or a charity, clearly from what you said, you take responsibility for the scheme, including the investors, I think you said. Does that include the relationship with the investor, and how does that work? Yes.
So again, same thing. We may help you get investor or investors. We would train you up on how to do it, it's really very simple. In my view, it's very simple. Most churches can run a house. They've usually been running a vicarage or curate's house for many decades, and they can work out how to collect rents and explain that to an investor. You can work out how to pay council tax, collect water money, and set up utilities. So and there's a business lease that you would have with the investor. That's part of the intellectual property you buy off us. We would train you in how to use that. We'd train you in all that stuff that you want. In the event you would rather not be the landlord and not have that responsibility, we can do that for you. We're very happy to do that, and we just charge an admin fee for that, and that admin fee is £100 a month. Did that make sense? That felt a bit garbled.
Yeah, no, that's okay. And the kind of link to that, if a franchise is a church and they are looking to get an income from their property because they need to sort of prop up their own, finances as a church, again, how would that work? Or doesn't it?
Yeah, no, you should make a surplus on every house. I think last year of our 65 houses we had last year, 64 made a surplus, and the one that didn't, it just went wrong. So you've got a 64 out of 65% chance of making a surplus. Roughly speaking, you're looking at between 2 to 5 grand, maybe 6 grand if you do really well per annum. We will train you up on how to collect that rent, understand benefits, manage that rent, all those sort of things, so that your church should have money at the end of it. Now, what you do with that money, most churches actually, they put that into a little fund for the poor, and they use that to distribute to the poor. But the other thing you can use is it can contribute to the cost of the empowerment work if that person is paid. But I know I was in Lincoln the other week and I saw their bank account. They had 1,500 in it. They've paid off their empowerment worker. They've paid all the house bills, and they've got a balance of £1,500. Small church running one house for women fleeing domestic violence.
What about difficult objections from sort of neighbours and things? I guess that's the responsibility of the empowerment worker and all those and the team around them. But what's your experience of all that?
Yeah, first thing I say to this is we have experience of neighbours who are really grateful for our tenants. They put their bins out, they cook for them, they've done things like that. So I just put that in here to say, you know, our tenants can also be great neighbours, and don't expect them to be otherwise. Necessarily. Of course, we've had complaints from neighbours, and of course, we've had some difficult situations that we've dealt with. One thing we've learned: never buy a house in a cul-de-sac. It just doesn't work with the neighbours. If you get a house in a terrace or semi-detached, then you find your neighbour relationships are a lot better, or they're not aware we're there. As a start, we don't tell any of the, and if there is a complaint, we respond really hard and really fast. So we'll be quite strong on the tenants, and we'll often get them to apologize themselves to try and teach them how to be good neighbors, if you like. But when we buy a house, we don't tell the neighbors what we're doing. We just go in and say we're letting this out. We're landlords. We keep it confidential, because otherwise you've stigmatized the tenants before they move in. In the event they find out, we completely flip that, and we're totally transparent, and we'll give them complaint forms and everything else. But I haven't had an issue cross my desk about a neighbor having the hump for a good few months now.
I must just say, I mean, it's the same in our night shelters, isn't it? We very rarely have issues in night shelters. Very rarely. When you have them, they're enormous, as you would expect. But mostly, and Lorna's nodding, I can see over there. We just don't. You know, these are just ordinary people who need support and help. And that's, I think, all of those things that Ed was talking about. When I started finding out about this, I was a bit daunted, and I thought, oh gosh, collecting rent, but you know, that's the empowerment worker's job. That one person is going to do that on behalf of everybody. They're trained to do it. That's what they do. What we're free to do is to love that person in our community, surround them with the support they need. That's what churches do best. That's what the community wants to do, and that's what makes it work, I think.
Which is a nice lead into another question. If a church provides a support team, or a couple of churches provide some support teams for the guests, what sort of budget should they cater for or allow for, in just making sure those things are covered? And are there any sort of nice bits added to it, if you like, a bit of redecorating, furnishing, that sort of thing? Is there a sort of budget guide you might be able to put into the mix?
Yeah, if you're a church, first of all, we ask the church to furnish the building. So we decorate and we get up to spec. We get the kitchen good, we get the bathrooms good, we get the gas certificates done, etc. But we love the church to then furnish it. Now, your church, I can assure you, in the garages of your church members has enough furniture to furnish that church. Or if it doesn't, you've got the initiative to furnish the church. And there's a checklist that we give, and often at the back of church there's a checklist, and people come and say, oh, Ed will do that one, I can do the bin in room 3 or whatever it is. So there's that. That's actually a fun part of the project. Churches often sink their teeth into it. Once a house has been refurbished, we allow at least a week for the church just to go in there, try to make it into a home, to love the place, to leave flowers and put pictures up or whatever they feel led to do. Once the tenants are in, again, the EW takes over most of the maintenance work. But if they can help with the gardening, that's really good. If they can help fix the odd leaky tap, if they've got a handyman in their congregation or handywoman, then that's really helpful. So it's those kind of things. I think in our SLA, our service level agreement, we suggest having a rough budget of £400 a year available, maybe buying more bed linen if a new person moves in. Those sort of small things that just make them feel loved and valued. But it's a rough guide. But we put in, I think, £400 a year from the church budget.
That's really helpful. Another one back on investors. How do they get their return? And is it on a monthly basis, annual basis, quarterly basis? How does it work?
Yeah, so if it was in Peterborough, we collect the rent, as in Hope Interaction UK collect the rent. We pay them on a monthly basis, and then yeah, so that's how it works. So basically, if you whatever you agree for your annual return, we'll divide that by 12 and pay you each month that amount. In a franchise situation, the franchise will do that, and they will collect the rent and pay the investor. In the event you think, oh, we can't do that, or for whatever reason you don't want to do that, we're happy to collect the rent, be the landlords, and pay the investor off. But what we charge you £100 a month for that. So that's £100 that could go into your church.
Can I just ask Ed, because I'm one of those people that think if I can understand something, then everyone can understand it. If I was an investor, which I have to say, really sadly, I'm not, but I know some of the people here tonight are investors. If you're an investor and you're going to, it's different for people buying the house outright, but say you're going to put in £1,000 or £10,000 or some amount. So you're going to get monthly rent back. And then after 5 years, you're going to either be offered the chance to sell the house or carry it on for another 5 years. You're nodding, so I'm assuming I'm on the right track. That's good. When the house is then sold, you get your money back plus 2%. Is that right?
So everything's right. So if let's say you put £10,000 in, and the net value of the net amount invested is £100,000, you own 10% of the house at the point you purchase it. Every year you get 2% back on your £10,000 you've invested. So I can't remember what that's £200, I think. So you'll get £200 guaranteed back to you every year. And you divide that by 12, that's what you'll get every month. As you say, when you get to the end of 5 years, you either sell or renew. If you choose to sell, you owned 10% at the start of the agreement. You own 10% of the new value of the property. So the property may have gone up in value, in which case you take back more money, or it may have gone down in value, in which case you take back less value. That is entirely your risk. But if it has, so yeah, that's like your capital investment that goes up and down with the value of the property. In addition, you get guaranteed 2% every year.
Thank you.
We don't sell it on the fact it's a good financial deal, but it is 0.1% you're getting in your ISA at the moment. But that's not the reason we encourage anyone to invest in. We say you're doing this as a heart for the homeless. You want to share your wealth with the poor, a sense of mutuality. So we don't give massive, great big returns because we don't think that's right to make that amount of money on the back of the poor. But it's a sound investment between you, the poor, the church. That's what we're trying to have, a sense of mutuality between the three.
I think we've covered all the questions that have come in.
Okay.
Oh.
Are you done, Nigel?
Yeah, sorry, I thought one came in at the bottom there, but no, I think we're in.
Okay. Oh,
Can I just say one last thing? The challenge, of course, in this area, if you were in, let's say, Newcastle, which I know nothing about, I could be saying to you now, don't worry. I'd be saying to you about, don't worry about the investments. I've got £500,000. I can buy you your first 2 houses without breaking sweat. That isn't the case for you guys. But I do think there's something that you have that's really worth exploring, and John can speak into this. And that's, at the moment, there is this great big need. The council have just found money to put people into hotels. They're desperate for move-on accommodation. If you knock on their door and say, we've got a proven solution, what can you do in terms of stumping up a house for us? You never know. With God on your side, they might say, oh, well, let's get back to you. And they might find a house. To give you an example of this, we just went to the council in Peterborough and said, we've seen a bit of land. Someone's given us some money. Can you give us the land, please, so we can build some houses on it? We didn't expect them to say yes. We'd budgeted to buy the land. They've just turned around and said, yes, have the land for free. So I just say that to encourage you to, I think that might be a good route to explore in terms of getting houses.
I just really echo that. I think it's a great thing for churches to approach the local authority. I'll share my email if you can't get hold of someone or you need an introduction, you know, do be in touch. But contact a lot of places have a rough sleeper coordinator. It's really worth approaching them and saying, you know, how can we help? That's a great way to start a conversation. But also to say, you know, we're looking at supported housing. There's a scheme here that works really well, that combines the professionalism with our kind of Christian ethos. I'd try and be confident and upfront, because churches up and down the country are involved in these things. And I think the night shelter movement have really shown a lot of local authorities that churches mean business. They're wanting to put their faith into action. They're willing to do things professionally. And I think, you know, be confident and really try and make those connections. I think it's a great witness.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I also think that the one thing I would say is, well, we're going to talk about the next steps, I think, aren't we, Ed? I think the first next step is to get yourself into your local group so that you can meet the other people who are there. Because what I think wouldn't probably be very helpful is if everyone starts going for their local authority without a united front. You can write in as Bromley Hope into Action, Bexley Hope into Action, Medway Hope into Action. We already know, through the night shelters, we know the local authorities, we know the right people to talk to, so that's not an issue. Some of you that don't work in that field might be thinking, oh, I wonder, but we do know. So working together as teams is going to be much better than just all of us shooting off in all directions. So the very first step after this is that I will invite you to come to your local groups to meet. How it goes from there is then entirely down to the local group, because that's important that you manage it your way together. You know that Ed's here, I'm here. I'm not going to say John's here, because I know that we've been so blessed to have John with us twice. That's like, wow. So I can't say that, but I have a team, a really, really good team of people. We can do this. We just need to talk, and the local groups need to talk to work out how they're going to do it. That's the thing. So I think that is the next step, and I will contact you very shortly after this so that you can start thinking about it. But you might also be wanting to go away and talk to others. You might want to talk to your own church or the local night shelter leader. You might want to see if there's anybody else that we haven't trawled. We've done 3 Zoominars now, and I would say that all the right people are here, but you might have other people that are not here or that you just know would be passionate for this. So now's the time to have a word and wheel them in. Ed, any other next steps from your point of view?
No, the only thing I'd say, do feel free to book a meeting with me any stage you want. Actually, my next 3 weeks, my calendar's quite free, and I've put time aside to be available for this. I have to say I'm off all of August, I've got sabbatical and so forth. Just to let you know our timetable, then in September, we're looking to write to people and invite you to assessment. And then the assessment is in early October, and then training in early November. So that's, and we may not put another one on for at least, well, maybe not 12 months, but certainly not 6 months. We've got a number of other franchisees we're onboarding, so you'll get the kind of rich learning of learning with others around during that time. But that's the dates. So in a sense, you know, you'll get it, you'll have to make a decision kind of thing, but by October. The assessment day will be a chance for you to further explore it as well. You're assessing us, we're assessing you. It's mainly a relationship building exercise and due diligence exercise. That can also be part of your decision making process if you're not 100% sure.
Yeah, that sounds good to me. Okay, we debated whether I should say this, but I think I am going to say this, Ed, so back me up on this one. I am in discussion with the Diocese of Rochester, and obviously we've got representatives here from Canterbury as well. It would be very logical and very easy if the diocese or the community engagement team would buy the franchise, but it's a big step. So those of you that work will know that it is a big step. So we are exploring that as well with Ed and John, and just looking at that too. So it's just another potential option. We don't really know at this moment, but we are praying. So I think that we're done. I think that all of you have a lot more questions. I would have lots more questions if I was there now, especially those of you who have come perhaps for the first time tonight. You will have lots of questions, and those are things now in the local groups. This is where the discussions and the work start. We want this to happen. It is going to happen. It's just going to be where, what, and how, and we can do that in our local groups. So I think that we are going to close. I'm going to ask Nigel to, that John's just put up his contact details there, everybody. That is, this really is when we're in the local groups and you're wanting to get in touch with your local authority if you're having trouble and I can't help you, Ed, John is there. And I must just say as well, Ed, when you said you're free for discussion, and Ed is also very kindly talking to anybody that wants to invest. So whether it's £1 or a whole house, do get that one-to-one booked with Ed, because that's his thing. That's the Hope into Action part of it that they do really well, and they've won national awards for, so we know it's good. Oh, and Ed's just put up his email as well. So so do write that down. I'll also put both of their emails into my follow-up email to you. So if it's all looking a little bit quick, don't worry, it will be there. So Nigel, it would be really fab if you would like to pray for us before we go. And I must just say to everybody, thank you for your time. Thank you for your passion, for your interest. Thank you for wanting to do something for homeless people, whoever they are, wherever they are right this minute. We want our arms to be open wide, ready for when they come back. So thank you for coming. If you are free on Wednesday night, it's just rather ironic that both are coming in the same week. But on Wednesday, we're talking about community hubs. And this is a community hub, is it not? And community hubs are what this is about, partners working together. Thank you, Nigel.
Let's just take a moment just to reflect on all that we've thought through, heard tonight. Father, thank you so much that you have a heart for justice and for peace and for bringing hope into a needy world through your church. And so, Father, as we ponder now on all that we've thought about and discussed tonight, will you stir all of our hearts to follow your lead in bringing hope and justice and peace and a roof over people's heads in the communities in which we live and work, Lord, we pray. And that's our prayer in your precious Son's name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you very much, John. Very much indeed. Thank you very much, Ed. And thank you very much, Nigel. And thank you all for coming. Stay safe and let's talk very soon. God bless. Bye-bye.